What is up, crew? Welcome to Seek the Edge podcast with me, Kelsey Lensman, where our mission is to challenge you outside of your comfort zone. Yes, physically, but also mentally, emotionally, the different areas so you can grow as a human, because growth usually will lay on the other side of your comfort zone. And today, it is going to be such an impactful podcast, especially to my ladies and my women out there. No matter what age you are, no matter where you're at in the phase of life that you're in, it is something that you will gather such good information from. And it's with a woman that not only I respect, but I'll say it in this way. I started my journey in sports medicine, and a missing link for me was I saw if it was a knee injury, they only focused on the knee. If it was a hip injury, it was only the hip. And not only is your full comprehensive body all played together, and your knee injury could come from your shoulder actually, but also it was, how's your mindset playing into it? Where's your nutrition at? And I have searched for years for a physician that had that mentality locally here. And yes, there's multiple others than just you, but there was not one that I could really understand and hit with that had the client and patient care that I valued, that had the knowledge, that really understood root cause, but then also pulled it all together. And I'm excited that we have Dr. Paige Gutheil on that will shed some information, yes, about perimenopause and menopause and the different phases of life for women, but then also the root cause approach that gets to the underlying issue to help you take that next step. So Dr. Paige, I'm excited to have you on.
Yay, me too.
Yeah. And I want to intro you so people can have an understanding of where you're coming from, also what you practice. And so you are an osteopathic family physician, certified menopause practitioner, and founder of Goza Wellness, where she's redefining healthcare through a whole person integrative approach that helps women break free from feeling sick and tired of being sick and tired. I know I've said that before. And Dr. Paige has been honored with numerous awards, from leading institutions, including Pfizer and Ohio University, for her innovation and impact, and is a dynamic speaker and educator sought after for her expertise on hormonal transitions, the power of sleep and spirituality in medicine, and her signature whole health approach to patient and provider wellness. We're going to mic drop on that. We're going to mic drop on that. I'm excited to have you on, Paige, and let's take a trip down memory lane for a second, because to understand your mindset is to understand first where you came from and how you got here.
Yeah.
So can you give me and the audience a little blurb about where you came from and how you got to this mindset of whole health approach and all of it?
For sure. So I knew fairly quickly that I wanted to go into family medicine. So by definition, family medicine is meant to serve birth till death. And I sought out an osteopathic medical school. So I'm a DO by training. Osteopathic medicine is known to be more holistic. We believe that the body is one unit, mind, body, spirit. We believe that the body has the innate ability to heal itself. Our job is to remove roadblocks to healing, but always respect the body's natural ability to heal. So the foundation of my medical training was holistic from the get-go. Well, because then we also train within the very traditional healthcare system, the second 2 years of medical school, so third and fourth year, and residency, I felt myself kind of being pulled away from that holistic approach just by nature of having to function within the system, right? And so then when I graduated, I joined the family business, honestly. I got to practice with my mom and dad. My dad was a family physician for decades, and my mom ran the practice. So it was like truly like family medicine. I got to bring my little girls to work with me for a couple years. It was great for the time that it was. But then along the way, I started focusing more on lifestyle medicine, functional medicine training. I started teaching at Ohio University's medical school, where I graduated from. And you just get pulled between like, what are the best practices that I'm teaching and how am I able to accomplish that? And so 7, 8 years ago, I decided to form my own practice. It's a membership-based practice where, being separated from insurance, we can be so creative in how we serve people. And we designed that practice to be able to really support mind, body, spirit, nutrition, fitness. And kind of developed my coaching system to go along with the practice. And as I've aged, go figure, I started hearing more and more from my patients, and the science really started becoming more and more clear around this hormonal transition, perimenopause and menopause. And so I sometimes joke, I'm like, man, as I'm listening to my patients, like, I think I'm catching this perimenopause thing.
It's contagious, I heard.
It's so contagious. Yeah. And so really like had a personal experience of like, hey, this is not stress. This is not, being newly single or grieving my father or, all these things that we can attribute symptoms to. I had to take a really like hard look at the real symptoms that I was blowing off, dive deep into my own professional testing, dive deep into my own self-care and how that was playing a role. And that really kind of decided to make the turn to apply that whole health approach to women in perimenopause and menopause. And it's a match made in heaven, honestly, because that decade of transition requires a whole health approach more than any other thing we can go through.
Well, I've had a few clients go to you.
Yes.
And I will tell you, and this is me not just making you feel good because you're on the podcast, it has been transformative for them to have a clinician that not only listens to them, but is doing kind of the tic-tac-toe work of, okay, let's try to put this here. Oh, well, this shifted. And okay, how are you responding with this? And not only are their physical results different, like I can tell tremendously the clients that have that support and that don't, it is night and day, especially going through this phase. And so we are going to talk a lot about perimenopause and menopause because I know a lot of people are excited to dig into it and especially be a sponge to your knowledge. But I want to go back to your story for a second and your journey. Is you were obviously with the family practice. You felt a call to not necessarily do anything different, but just transition roles. And that is seeking the edge of your comfort zone. And so can you talk to me briefly about what you went through of I'm feeling a nudge or I'm feeling a calling, I'm uncomfortable. Talk me through that initially.
Oh boy. Yeah. Talk about like stepping out of your comfort zone. One, just like I mentioned before, like as a family medicine physician, you are trained to support people from birth until death. You're trained to serve everyone. And so transitioning away from kind of that general approach to be able to say, no, my real genius, like my real area of calling is to fill the gap in an underserved population, which is women's health and perimenopause and menopause. Like that's probably the biggest challenge. And then before that, to your point, like just stepping out of the healthcare system and being able to say like, look, in order to function in alignment with my values, in order to do the work that I know people to deserve, it can't happen within the system. So how can I step outside? And then, I don't know, I think you always, we talk a lot about like, what's your why? And I know sometimes that can sound so cheesy, right? But having kids was huge, because everything becomes so clear of like the alignment of like, does this step put me more in alignment with being the kind of mom that I want to be for my girls? And not just in service to them, in service to myself, right? Like, am I taking care of myself in alignment for being the best mom? Am I, functioning in my practice in alignment with the mom I want to be? And so that probably gave me more courage than anything. And I hear that from women, and I'm sure you hear that from women. Like sometimes, fortunately or unfortunately, the motivation that comes simply from like, I deserve better for myself, sometimes isn't as much as I need to do this for my kids, or I need to do this for my family or for my partner, So I think we need both, right? We need to like gain that motivation from within us, but it's okay also to borrow motivation for a bigger picture in service to your community or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
So, the transition in my medical practice to the membership practice was actually super fun for me. And the whole reason it was fun is in my mind, in order to kind of deal with that rub of like, hey, I don't want to feel like I'm leaving people behind. I don't want to feel like I'm abandoning my patients. I put myself in the mindset. I know you've probably heard this or done this before. You kind of like adopt this identity, right? Like Beyonce's Sasha Fierce, that's what I always think about. So I adopted this identity of like, I'm just planning a party. I am just planning this beautiful experience for patients. And I sent out invitations that reminded me of my wedding invitation. Like it wasn't just like your standard business letter, like, hey, I'm switching. It was a card with inserts. And it's like, this is what I'm planning. Yeah. And anytime I felt that like little challenge of like, someone would maybe ask me like, but why are you doing this? But why can't I use my insurance and all this stuff? I'm like, I'm planning a party and, this is why I'm planning it. These are the benefits of my party. It's going to be great. It's going to be a great time. It's going to serve you so much better. But, you don't have to come. Maybe this isn't for you. Maybe this party is not, your cup of tea. And so that was super helpful to like not take it personally, right? And stay in alignment with like what I really felt like I needed to do.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I'm going to steal that from you. When I'm planning big events, just a party, just a big party.
Come, not come, it's
Sophia, make sure you remind me of that when I'm deep in event prep.
You're right.
So when you were in that transition, had you at that time gone through perimenopause, menopause, or where were you at in there?
The transition of my practice definitely came first. I was a youngster. Or like a lot of women, I just didn't even recognize the symptoms because that happens too. Right. So I haven't kind of parsed that out. But the first transition was my traditional private practice to a membership-based holistic primary care practice. And even that, I think as you go through life, you just kind of like are following the breadcrumbs, right? Like, so I thought my practice was going to look a certain way. And I designed it that way. And then I got in and felt it out a little bit. And I'm like, no, it's my first step was like, hey, it's great that now I have more time with people and I'm able to sit with them for an hour and a half their first visit, half hour, an hour in subsequent visits and hear them out and make all of these plans. And then I discovered what was happening was we would have these great plans and we'd have all this time, but then patients still have to go home and life still happens. And then they would come back maybe a month later, 2 months later, and 3 months later. And the ability to like follow through on those plans is still so hard, right? So then I decided, and then the other thing was the reality is like, I'm saying the same things over and over, right? And I'm like, well, more people need to hear this. And if I'm delivering it over and over again, who's to say that like I need to deliver it in the best way possible, So then we developed the coaching program where it's like, hey, let's actually walk alongside people to make that behavior change and help them set goals and follow through with them. And that's been an evolving process, and we're actually kind of revamping it right now. I think that's, again, one of the great things about having my own practice is the creativity that I can use to solve people's problems. Not only do I see it differently in my evolution, but, you see trends and kind of what people need, and you can pivot and kind of meet people where they are. So,
oh, I love that. I love it. So let's dig more into this perimenopause, menopause, because over the past, I would say 2-3 years, maybe 5 years, there's been more talk about it, and there's been more information. But as there's been more information, doesn't mean necessarily that some of it's applicable, and doesn't mean that some of it's correct for social media, right? So can you share with me, Paige, just what is perimenopause?
Yeah.
When do women start to experience it? Like some of the facts behind it, and then we'll also go some misconceptions, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there as well.
Love it. Okay. So perimenopause essentially is that period of time that can last 7 to 10 years prior to your last period. So we call menopause as this day, hey, once you haven't had a cycle for 12 months, you're in menopause. Well, that's fairly arbitrary, like a lot of definitions in healthcare.
I was going to say, that's very...
Once
yeah.
it's hindsight, right? Like, okay, well,
Right.
how do you predict going forward?
Right.
It's a whole nother topic. But in reality, it's not a very useful metric, because if you've had a hysterectomy, but you still have your ovaries, if you have an IUD, if you've had an ablation, like, that's not helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this arbitrary, period of time defined as menopause. Medically, that's helpful because we know at that point, your hormones have declined to the point where fertility is no longer a worry.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to even say a worry, because, a lot of women live their whole lives with this worry of fertility, whether getting pregnant, not getting pregnant, staying pregnant successfully. It's such a big part. And a lot of what I'm here to talk to women about is like, hey, let's not boil down our hormones just to our pelvis.
Right. Oh,
Hello.
Yes. Come on.
But yeah, so we have this definition of menopause. 7 to 10 years before menopause, naturally those hormones are going to start changing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably even more helpful to like rewind even farther back. Like sometimes we talk about perimenopause, just like I did, like, okay, let's rewind from menopause. But let's actually start back to like as a kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like during childhood, hormones are relatively stable.
Mm-hmm.
Then we hit puberty. We all know puberty's chaotic. We know that those changing hormones affect our brain development, they affect our mood, they affect our body. And it's all this signaling of like your body just trying to kind of figure things out.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot of grace for that period of time. So I always like to remind women, like, let's remember our hormonal transition times, whether it be puberty or pregnancy or perimenopause, have to come with a lot of grace, because it's an adaptation time. That's what the body is doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's adapting. So then after puberty, we settle into the reproductive years. Healthcare, medical research, fairly obsessed with reproduction when it comes to women's health. But again, hormones are all over body signalers. And so reproductive years, even though they can be challenging, for a lot of women, it feels, very rhythmic, it's cyclical. We know that hormones fluctuate during that month's time, but it feels fairly predictable. Well, then perimenopause comes, and essentially what's happening physiologically, the brain is very accustomed to signaling to the ovary. It's a beautiful relationship. The mama brain sends out the signals. The daughter ovary takes the marching orders and goes off. Well, the ovary was designed to be functional for 48, 52-ish years, right? And that's an interesting timeline, because that actually was the average life expectancy even as of 100, 150 years ago.
That's crazy.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So in a lot of ways, when people are like, oh, menopause is like, it's a natural thing, we're just meant to go through it. I'm like, well, kind of. But menopause, when you think about it, is not actually all that natural, because it's like relatively new on the scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's only relatively recently that we are outliving our ovaries. And that's exactly what happens. So the goal of the ovaries is primarily to produce progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, and eventually its signaling tuckers out. And as it's doing that, our adrenal glands and our brain pick up on it. It's a major physiologic stress on the body. And so
when they tucker out?
Yeah, when that signaling starts becoming erratic, like progesterone typically starts to go down first. It kind of goes down in a fairly like smooth fashion. Estrogen starts to go down, but before it doesn't go down without a fight. It certainly does not. It starts really becoming chaotic. So you have surges of estrogen and drops of estrogen. And then testosterone typically goes down pretty gradually too. Although I do find that Some women maintain testosterone levels like longer into adulthood. I've drawn testosterone levels that are fairly high in 50s and 60s.
Oh.
And we have other women that, have very low testosterone levels early on. And so, you know, once you kind of, one, have those changes in sex hormones, and then two, have the body picking up on that physiologic stress, you have a lot of other things online that are affected, both directly because those hormones, we have hormone receptors, sex hormone receptors in every single system in our body. So naturally, our brain's affected, our heart's affected, our bones are affected, our gut's affected. But then also just like resource wise, if the body has a general like physiologic stress on it, then you have some other things that I kind of call them the forgotten other children. Like sometimes our thyroid goes offline or sometimes our gut health suffers. And those sometimes, like I said, you can explain direct hormonal effects, but sometimes the effects are more kind of downstream than that.
Mm. You remind me when you had your summit last summer.
Yeah.
I stayed for when you talked about this specific thing. You had an image of a family. And
Yeah.
I loved that image because it just put into context what you're saying with the hormones, because it can be very confusing
Yeah.
when you're hearing progesterone, estrogen, testosterone. You're like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And so I love that image. And if we can, we'll try to find it and put it in a
Yeah.
link for somebody,
Yeah.
because that was such an easy way to remember it.
Yeah.
But can we rabbit hole for a second?
Sure.
And with estrogen and progesterone, testosterone, like the main hitters
Mm-hmm.
with regards to this, can you describe what they are and like what they do?
For sure. So if there's one thing about female hormones, we all get along. We all cooperate. We're girls here. Like progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone, I see them kind of in that classic Venn diagram, right? Where in the middle, they're all getting along and they're all functioning well. So, but then on the outside of the Venn diagram, they all kind of take the lead in certain areas. So when we describe what each hormone does, it's kind of an oversimplification because, again, they all cooperate, but we use those areas of leadership for each hormone to kind of make sense of it, right? And so if we start with progesterone, progesterone is very much a calming hormone and a stabilizing hormone. So it's very neuroactive. It has a strong relationship to a neurotransmitter called GABA, which is very much a relaxation neurotransmitter. And it also stabilizes the effects of estrogen. And so some of the effects of low progesterone, one, they tend to happen in the couple of weeks before you start your period because progesterone is higher in those 2 weeks before your cycle. We can have dips in mood. We can have a sense of anxiety, kind of irritability, sometimes palpitations, sleep popping up in the middle of the night, without being able to get back to sleep, heavier periods, shorter cycles. And so that technically progesterone deficiency can happen at any time. Some women with lower progesterone levels, they might have more PMS type symptoms. They may be they may have more of a tendency for premenstrual migraines. But definitely we find that some of the earliest symptoms of perimenopause are directly connected to that progesterone. And it's what I hear from women. First of all, the biggest thing I hear is, I don't feel like myself. Something's off. And so we really don't even have the verbiage that we should have to describe some of this stuff, because a lot of women are like, well, it's not really like palpitations, but something, and it's not like I'm anxious, but like something, it's just off. And I think that point is very key because it's so easy to essentially gaslight ourselves to say, oh, it must be stress, or I should be off my phone, or I probably had caffeine too late, or maybe I had, an extra glass of alcohol at girls' night. And it's not that way all the time. And well, I can still function, and so think of all that I just mentioned. It's one, kind of gaslighting, like, oh, writing it off to different things without having the full conversation to know all the contributors. Two, blaming ourselves, which, full accountability, like we have to take accountability for how our self-care, affects our symptoms. But I think getting that full picture is so important. And then, it's a matter of just like, kind of like, I don't know, I think we have normalized female suffering way too much. If we think we can get through it bleeding and crawling, we're like, oh, I'm fine. It's like, no, we deserve to optimize our health, right?
Actually thrive, not just survive at the end of the day.
So much. Yeah. So that's good old progesterone. Estrogen, when it starts going low, and keep in mind it's erratic before it goes low. So sometimes you'll just notice symptoms like a few days before your cycle or during your cycle, which are naturally the lowest estrogen times of the month. And then they'll be fine. And then they'll come back, and it's hard to connect the dots, right? But low estrogen signs tend to be hot flashes, night sweats, which let me tell you that the vision that we get of a hot flash in the movies, or like Aunt Betsy peeling off her clothes, is like not the full hot flash. Like, you can call it a hot flash if it's like a sudden surge of warmth for no other reason. So the majority of women that I talk to, they're like, oh, well, yeah, I'm definitely having those. It's like,
right.
We kind of have this vision again, like if it's not to,
nth degree,
I don't give myself credit for it. So hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, vaginal just irritation symptoms. A lot of women, I call it feeling UTI-ish. It's like, oh, it's kind of burning, but not, and just uncomfortable. Sometimes that translates to uncomfortable feelings with intercourse, having to go to the bathroom more frequently, but also changes in mood, feeling blah, feeling ragey. All over body aches and pains is a big one that I think a lot of people don't give themselves credit for. Just getting out of bed and feeling like, gosh, all of a sudden I feel like I'm 90, and I'm only 45. So those are kind of the bigger estrogen type symptoms that we look for. And then testosterone is an interesting one, because a lot of us grew up thinking of testosterone as like the blue hormone and estrogen's the pink hormone, but we all have both, right? And so testosterone is very much a brain hormone. It's very much a musculoskeletal system hormone as well. So libido is certainly linked to testosterone. I think that's what you hear about the most. But if you think about it, libido is a mood, right? It's a brain action. It's a mood. And so we know also that testosterone is related to other mood signs. Maybe it's lack of motivation, just feeling blah, just not feeling like their brain has the energy it used to, can't fire on all cylinders, like can't find that word. And then also maintenance of muscle mass or ability. Sometimes what we see is like, gosh, they've been getting after it with you. Like I'm doing the things I know I'm supposed to do, and I'm not being able to increase my weights. I'm just not progressing. And so that's definitely, often related to testosterone. One thing I should mention about testosterone is, and to some degree with this whole picture, can I say that we have all the fancy schmancy medical studies on a lot of hormone care? No, we do not. Do we have a lot of studies that then listening to our patients and knowing how physiology works, that we can safely extrapolate that data to what the person in front of me is going through? Absolutely. Yes, we do. Right? So testosterone is one area, for example, that it's a very personalized level. Like if we were truly doing a service to women's health, we would know what your testosterone is right now, what it was maybe when you were 20, when you were 40, when you were 50. And so that we can get a kind of a better gauge for like, gosh, is this related to a decrease? What's your personal norm? And so there are a lot of like healthcare issues, research issues, societal norm type issues that, play a role in this. And it's one of the reasons I love menopause care, honestly, so much, because I truly believe that my job is to practice evidence-based medicine, but also have a huge respect for not just what the studies say, but how do you want to feel? What are your goals? And what are your, what I call healthcare philosophy, right? Like I have some people that, you know, are like longevity by technology. Like they want to know all the stuff, all the red light, all the plunges, all the supplements, all the peptides. And it's like, hey, I'm here for it. And then there are some people that are like, no, I'm not into any of that. So let's talk about the pluses and the minuses of, you know, kind of what we choose. So,
which is why I love the way that you practice, because it
Yeah.
is very individual for the person. And I'm only 30 right now, so
Yep.
thank God not yet perimenopause and that season of life, just hormonally for me. But even I would have been 22 or 23 at the time. And I just came off a couple bodybuilding seasons. And for that, it's you push your body hard. And granted, I had a great coach, which cannot always be said in the bodybuilding world. But even if you have a great coach and you do it appropriately, you're still pushing your body hard.
Yeah.
And under fueling it, definitely to some extent, which is why I don't necessarily advocate it for many people out there, and training it hard. And I remember coming off of my second season, there was a period for a couple months where I didn't get a cycle.
Yeah.
And that really tweaked me out because I was like, okay, Kels, yes, you're competing in this thing that is not an excuse for you to forego what your body physiologically needs and hormonally needs.
Yeah.
And so at the end of that, I ended up reaching out to somebody locally. I got a number from somebody, and I was like, I need to see where everything's at. And so I got my labs, and I was probably 22 at that time. I got my labs for the first time, and it was mind-boggling, Paige, when those labs came back, what certain values were. And that was the first time where it really opened my eyes to looking underneath the hood, where at that time, if you would have saw a picture of me, I would have been the picture of health, Paige.
Oh, yeah.
The six-pack, the definition, like you would have saw me and say, she is the healthiest she's ever been.
Yep.
But if you were to look underneath the hood and see my labs and what the optimal was versus what it was personally, and then it was in normal range, but it wasn't even close to optimal, and how my body responded for that. That was where the first light bulb moment went off of, we need to see what's going on underneath the hood.
Yeah.
And we have to understand that. And then fast forward to last year, so about 7 years-ish later, came off the 100 prep and different things I was doing, and my body comp wasn't feeling the way that it normally felt. Like I just felt heavier.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just from a scale, but my body just felt heavier. Energy was lower. I'm like, what is going on now? And I'm usually an advocate, and I would love your feedback on how often labs you recommend for women. But at that time, I was like, I want at least one time a year to see where my labs are.
Yeah.
And so I got my labs last year, and it once again was an eye-opener of, Kels, you're not taking care of yourself to the way that you need to. And I could have easily dismissed that as, well, I'm really busy, I'm doing this, I'm doing that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't forego what your body actually needs.
Yep.
So first, how often would you recommend women to get labs? I mean, anybody, but women specifically.
Right.
And then I want to ask another question on top of that.
Yeah. So I think a really good argument could be made, even if everything's going well, for annual blood work. You know, and I think the traditional, you know, healthcare system will sometimes have different recommendations for different items, right? Like, hey, starting at age 25, we screen for this, and not till age 30 do we screen for this. Yeah. And so sometimes that can be a challenge, but, and that's based on screening, right? So when you think about it, we don't go, the traditional healthcare system doesn't recommend like going to look for problems without symptoms very often. And we do that for things that are relatively common and don't cause a lot of symptoms, right? And so that's where you get, and I should say, there is a population-based intervention that's available. So you could make the argument that like, hey, if something's fairly common, even, and we have a screening for it, if there's nothing we can do about it, then maybe we don't need to go looking for it, right? Now, I would argue like there's literally nothing that we don't have things we can do about it, right? So, But just so people know, kind of like maybe when you've heard from your doctor, or if you go to their doctor, when you hear them say like, oh, we don't recommend that, like that's what they're looking at, evidence-based, wide population study. But then when we're looking, like I said before, at the person that's sitting in front of me, what their healthcare goals are and what their body's going through, then we have to say like, okay, let's expand that a little bit. And I would argue, I don't think I've ever thought of it this way, it just popped in my mind, that a cycling female is never in a completely preventive state. We are all, our physiology is being challenged every single month, right?
Yeah.
We are losing blood every single month. And so that in and of itself deserves like a look underneath the hood. Am I replenishing myself every year? Like, what are my blood counts? What's my ferritin level? You know, what are my iron counts? So I think, you know, baseline, what I call a foundational, expanded foundational blood work, which means it's not just, you know, sometimes it's like a glucose check and a lipid level. That's all that's recommended or all that's covered under insurance. So we need to expand that. And then from there, sometimes it's worth diving deeper, right? And usually we do that either based on risk factors or, you know, based on symptoms. Because we also don't, in my opinion, want to swing to the other end of the spectrum, which is, let me just test for everything. My Lord, the cost alone, right? And we know that I often make the analogy of like bowling pins, right? And this goes back to what I said earlier, that's very foundational in my osteopathic training, which is the body has the ability to heal itself. And so when I think about health and bowling pins, all these tests could be different bowling pins, right? But if we know at different phases of life what are the front bowling pins, then we really only have to make sure that those are in alignment and we'll get the strike. You know, we hit those, the body's taking care of the rest. So when you hear things like maybe starting out with testing for food sensitivities or toxin load, or there's, I don't want to like call out any, you know, one particular thing, but there are just certain things that it's like, oh, those are pretty much back bowling pins most of the time. And I will say, is being a hormone expert, as much as I love the female hormones, for most of our life, hormones and hormone testing are back bowling pins, right? Like for a 22-year-old who is in your situation, I would not, as foundational, you know, evaluation, test your estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone probably. Well, I would test your testosterone only because I would want that baseline.
It was tanked. It
Right?
was completely tanked.
Yeah, I would want that baseline.
Yeah.
But if we, to my point of like, if there are so many other front bowling pins, thyroid function, general blood counts, inflammatory markers, kidney, liver, electrolytes, glucose, insulin, you know, there are things that are front bowling pins. If we get those rolling in the right direction, together with, you know, obviously you kind of know from a lifestyle perspective exactly what pressure was put on your body and what caused everything to kind of be out of kilter. So when we deal with those, it's like, hey, we don't have to test everything up front. We can test foundational, do some work, see where we are, and, you know, progress from there. Because yeah, hormones, when you think, I worked with a mentor one time that called hormones, canaries in the coal mine. Have you ever heard that? I don't, somebody knows. I should know this. Like my family is from like Southern Ohio and West Virginia. Like we have some coal miners, you know, like in the family. But so a canary in the coal mine, like first, they're like the first thing that brings a message, right? And so someone is going to have to write the ship in the comments and tell us where that came from. Right. I'm searching in my brain. But so when other things go out of whack, right, our hormones are going to be the first to be to show it, right? And so I think we all kind of grew up hearing that somewhat because what did we hear? If like, oh, if your period's a little early or if your period's a little late, the first thing they would ask is like, how's your stress? Are you sleeping? And, I guess sometimes I like to geek out, like from the scientific side, it's like, okay, kind of makes sense. Like if our body is able to prioritize reproduction full steam ahead, there are some things that need to be in place. And if we don't have those things in place, maybe our body's going to kind of like not prioritize balancing hormones. So
I'm glad that you shared about the bowling pin analogy because, like I said initially, is we're in the age of information.
Oh, yeah.
Like information overload. And every scroll on Instagram you see, well, you could have this or you could have this or do this next test. So I'm really glad that you shared that analogy because, yes, testing and not guessing is important, but it also can make you crazy at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Or when you're not understanding of the bowling pins, you're just kind of whack-a-mole and you're really not having strategy. So can you share, we talked estrogen, progesterone, testosterone.
Yeah.
Can you share some of the other bowling pins, whether it be hormones, about what to test, but then also why it's important and why those are main bowling pins?
Yeah. So I'll look through the lens of like perimenopausal age. Maybe we're having some symptoms, or maybe we feel like, hey, we're doing okay, but we're gonna do some foundational testing. I think blood counts, like I mentioned before, are always important. Ferritin levels, because we are losing blood every month, and we find that sometimes we take for granted that we've been doing this for years, we can keep up those iron levels, but they are very easily sacrificed. And there's no tired like a low iron tired. And so part of what we're thinking in the perimenopause lens is, hey, what's related to perimenopause? What's related to like decreasing our risk of something or preventing something, but also like what's contributing to various symptoms, right? So blood counts, ferritin, there's a smart little cheap panel that gives us kidney function, liver function, electrolytes, blood sugar. Lovely. We have to know that all everything's firing in the right cylinders. Thyroid function.
And the thyroid, I'm going to interrupt you again. Is that the TSH level, or are there other values that you take into account?
You'll hear different opinions on this. Okay. TSH is the most basic like screening test. And so you can make the argument quite honestly that if you have an optimal TSH level, you probably don't need to dive deeper into pre-T3, T4 antibodies. Now, I will say that in the perimenopausal age range where women are at higher risk for autoimmune issues, and in general, women are at higher risk for autoimmune issues, that it's nice to know, even if your body's keeping up with thyroid function right now, it's nice to know if it's producing antibodies, because that might mean that you're at risk for having low thyroid in the future. And we do have some actionable ways that we can help with autoimmune issues, right? So I typically recommend screening for thyroid antibodies. And then I also kind of springboarding off that metabolic panel, a fasting glucose level gives us a lot of information, but it doesn't really give us the full picture of glucose metabolism, which is so important. So having a fasting glucose level plus a fasting insulin level plus a hemoglobin A1C is a better look at overall glucose metabolism. Let's go down that rabbit hole if you permit me. All right.
I'm down.
So when we talk about glucose, I think just like in a lot of ways, like our healthcare system is very good at defining like the disease state, right? Diabetes. And we don't want to, type 2 diabetes in particular, we don't want to downplay that. Of course, that's super important. But glucose is our currency of energy, right? Like, why aren't we talking about glucose level in terms of energy? So everything we eat gets broken down into glucose molecules. Your body has to pair a glucose molecule with insulin to get energy inside the cell. So that process is just so key, right? And so a lot of times, especially in periods of stress, there's a cortisol stress connection to everything, a lot of times that process will get a little clunky and your body will start producing more insulin to try to get the job done. Because remember, our body is so wise. It's always trying to adapt, always trying to heal itself, even if that healing mechanism is a little misguided or maybe has some downstream effects. And so insulin, even though it's a beautiful thing, it helps us get our energy. If you have too much of it, it does create a very strong storage signal. And so a lot of women who have insulin resistance can be doing all the things and their body is kicking in a storage signal versus a burn signal more than we want it to. So I think it's really important to get a look at that picture. Cardiovascular risk, screening lipid levels, sometimes screening what's called an ApoB and an Lp(a). Those are fancy tests that help us combine with the lipid level, know what our vascular health is like, what our heart health is like. And then typically I also add in a couple of vitamin screens. Sometimes typically that's vitamin D, because hashtag Ohio, like everywhere.
Hashtag
but
no sun for 6 months.
yeah. So vitamin D is a hormone. I mean, it acts more like a hormone than a true vitamin. It's just involved in so much. It's relatively common to run low in B12, especially people that prefer a vegan or vegetarian lifestyle. And so B12, again, is involved in so much. And energy, metabolism, like that's just one thing that is, it's kind of low-hanging fruit, to be honest with you. It's like, oh yeah, let's optimize that. We got that going on our side, that and vitamin D. Sometimes we check iodine levels, because iodine deficiency is actually fairly common and is key to thyroid health. Magnesium levels, and I think I got everything.
Wow. Do you do cortisol or any inflammatory markers?
Inflammatory markers for sure. I kind of consider that in the vascular profile, but there's two different inflammatory markers. One, it's called CR or high sensitivity CRP. That's more related to vascular health. And then what's called a sedimentation rate, which is kind of a general screen for inflammation. What was the other one that you mentioned? Oh, cortisol.
Yeah.
Cortisol is interesting. I have tested and will test cortisol. But I don't want to sound ornery here.
You sound ornery as you want.
I've never had a cortisol test surprise me. And so a lot of doctors will be like, why are we testing? Like, it fluctuates so much, but we can standardize it to a morning level, or there are reliable tests where you can get an all-day value. And then sometimes doctors will say, well, we don't want to do a test again if there's nothing we're going to do about it. And I will tell you, I have gained such an appreciation for, even if I don't need the test, and I say I don't need the test because I've never had a level surprise me. I know from talking to someone if their stress levels are too high. We know this, right? But personally and professionally, I think there is power to data. Like, we all know that we could have a conversation about our stress. I could say, you know what, this, and that, that being shot out of bed like a cannon in the morning and go throughout the day without any downtime and having all the notifications on and scrolling, like, that is not good for our stress levels. And even with the best of intentions, I can talk to someone and they're like, yes, we're good, And then you see the bold red mark on your lab values and you're like, oh,
this
now, we've all been trained by that. I was talking to a teacher today. We've all been trained by that red pen, So, and we want to get a gold star. We want to get a sticker on our, and bonus points if it's a scratch and sniff, please. So some testing, quite honestly, again, like I mentioned this, not to downplay other physicians, but like when you hear physicians say like, oh, we don't test that, or we, there's some rationale behind it. Usually when women come to me and they're frustrated with other physicians, I know what they're thinking. And I'm like, dude, if you just would have said this, at least she would understand why. And she would know the rationale and feel heard related to it. So it's like, you have to go the extra mile and say like, hey, this is the pros and cons of testing.
Right.
You know, you have this cost, you have this like irreliability, you know, but yeah, I oftentimes tell patients like, to a great degree, like peace of mind is an indication for testing.
Yeah.
You know, and of course we don't take that to extreme, you know, but because, you know, we could want a lot of things done for peace of mind that, you
Very
know, there's an
much so.
extreme to everything, right?
Right.
But to a great degree, like sometimes, you know, we have to honor that mind component and both with testing and any like intervention, any treatment. It's like you have to honor the mind component and say, is this in alignment with my philosophy? Is this going to cause one big thing that when I think about health, I kind of think in these buckets, right? Mind component, biochemical component, and a structural component. And then I kind of break it down even from there. But when we look at all the pillars, they almost intertwine like that Venn diagram. And one big principle is like, if we are considering something, whether it's a test or a treatment, if that improves one component of health at the detriment of another, we got to call it off, right? And I think not enough people consider that. One example would be in the realm of nutrition, right? Like you talk through all the time with your clients, like what approach are we going to take to tracking our nutrition or, you know, setting macro goals. And it's like, if tracking, if looking at that data, if our mind is not ready to see that data playfully out of curiosity with a lens of self-love, then I don't want the data. If you're going to weaponize that data against yourself, we're not getting it, you know? So
That's exactly it. As I see people ask me all the time, like, what's your philosophy with this? I was like, it's dependent on the person.
Yeah.
You have to understand where they're coming from to know what approach to take, as you do with medicine and everything there. Man, I want to go for another 45 minutes, but I do be respectful of your time. And I do want you back to really pigeonhole perimenopause and menopause, because I have so many questions on that. But can you, just to leave a little cliffhanger for everybody, the symptoms of perimenopause? There's women out there that have no idea they're even experiencing this.
Yep.
But they're frustrated and they are tired of being sick and tired.
Yep.
So can you just go in briefly with that?
Oh boy.
I know.
Well, we mentioned some of the symptoms talking about progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone.
Right.
So when we look at those symptoms, it's going to be some constellation of changes in mood, whether anxiety, depression, ragey, changes in brain energy, so can't think straight, memory, sometimes a sense of confidence. I was talking to a lady the other day who she's like, I speak on stages, big stages. I can't get up there anymore, you know? And you can imagine how like our first like inkling is to say like, what's wrong with me, more from a psychological perspective. But even a psychological perspective has physiology behind it, right? Like we have neurotransmitters. They're creating thoughts and feelings. So brain energy, palpitations, all over body aches and pains, some changes in metabolism we could go all day on, changes in like unexpected changes in weight, sometimes even less than the number on the scale, but how you're storing. So belly fat as opposed to hips and thighs, hot flashes, night sweats, changes in libido, changes in sexual response, changes in how you're feeling in the urinary area, vaginal area, dry hair, skin, nails. I mean,
We can go deep.
we could go. Yeah. But yeah, can talk more about that. And then I think it's so important to turn the page, because the story of perimenopause is not a story of woe.
Yeah.
It's nothing to be scared of. I talk to a lot of ladies in their 20s and 30s, like you, and they're like, holy hell, what's coming? And it's like, hey, we can do this. We can do this. So there are things that prepare you, that honestly, I wish I would have looked with this lens when I was 30 to be like, okay, I got this. And then also, how do we approach the perimenopause and menopause time, and how do we know, like, is lifestyle enough?
Right.
Supplementation, hormone replacement.
I want to dig into all those
Let's do it.
those with you.
Yeah.
You have to pick up your kid at pretty soon, don't you?
What time is it?
3:00.
Yeah,
Which
let's do it.
we can have you back.
Let's do a volume 2.
Yeah, we're gonna do volume 2. I'm
Volume
gonna
2.
leave you with these last 2 questions. Is for the woman in their 20s and 30s, what
Yeah.
are 2 things they can do that is gonna help them now going into this next season? And then for the woman in perimenopause and or menopause,
Yeah.
what are 2 things they can do to improve their quality of life?
You're going to make me pick just 2. Well, honestly, I think they're the same.
Okay.
Well, no, let's start with 20s and 30s. I would say 1, knowing and appreciating how your body works, and like what your hormone fluctuations really feel like. Because we sometimes go through the menstrual cycle and just feel like it's out of left field, but really knowing, like, okay, what do those lower hormone times a month feel like for me typically? So just that awareness through the lens of self-love. Nothing's wrong with you. We live in a society that defines male physiology as normal physiology. So naturally, when we are not functioning like our male friends and colleagues, we're like, oh, something's wrong with me. There are 2 very unique normals. And so we really need to embrace our normal. And then the second one would be in the category of sleep and stress resilience. Because what we find is when we can get away with a lot. We can get away with a lot in our teens and 20s and 30s. And if you kind of skate into the perimenopausal land without that level of physiologic resilience, so you've been, maybe it's overtraining, maybe it's under eating, maybe it's overscheduling, maybe it's under sleeping. When you've been dipping into those reserves for years or decades, it's very difficult. And then, for that woman who's in perimenopause, I started to say it would be the same thing, because it kind of is, right? It's how do I get to know that, okay, this is normal? And that's a hard conversation, honestly, as a physician, because I truly want every woman who comes to me feeling perimenopausal symptoms to recognize that they're not broken. There's nothing wrong. Their body is adapting. They're not looking at their 13-year-old daughter who's having mood changes and body changes and telling them, like, just get it together, like we tell ourselves, So we have to have that lens of grace and feeling of like, okay, I'm not broken, but how do I support myself to thrive during this time? And then sleep and stress resilience. The difference is, physiologically, we have to look at the fact that the ovary is tuckering out, and there's nothing in the stress bucket, in the nutrition bucket, in the fitness bucket, in the supplementation bucket that's going to bring back those hormones. So a lot of women feel like, oh, I just need to do better. And there does come the time where we have to say, no, your body actually needs physiologic support, so.
We are digging into that
Yeah.
next. Okay. There's a few things I want to chat through next time. So we're going to talk cycle, and from a regular quote unquote cycle, what does that look like from the hormone fluctuations, and
Yeah.
what do women most often experience? Because I know when I grew up and we had the 6th grade sex education,
Oh, yeah.
and you're just like,
Dude, you know what my dad did?
oh no.
So my dad was
Oh,
a physician.
no. Okay.
There's a old school medical text called the Merck Manual.
Okay.
It's this thick. Opened that up to the female reproductive chapter and said, "Here, read this."
No, he
I
did.
was like,
Did you read it?
"What? No."
The little diagrams in there. Oh, that's throwing me back to the video. Oh Lord.
Oh, that was
So
that
we
was our
just
sex
don't
ed.
learn
Yeah.
this stuff. So
No.
I do want to dig into that, because where there's knowledge, there is potential power, but in this case, power.
Yeah.
So I want to talk through that. I do want to talk through more of the physiological side of perimenopause, but then also menopause in general.
Yeah.
Like women that are in that stage, what do they do? How do they help?
Yep.
And I would love to chat through hormone supplementation and your philosophy and your thoughts around that, because that is definitely a lot of misconceptions come with that. And also just judgments and opinions without really understanding. So I would love to dig into those things. But I appreciate this time just really laying the foundation of not just your lens in medicine, but how everything interacts. And if, at least what I'm gathering deeply from this, is your whole body plays into one another.
Yeah.
And to the especially hormonal side of it and neurological side. So I appreciate the work that you're doing with women and just what you're spearheading, because more people need to understand this. So go ahead.
I'm glad you said spearheading, because I really feel like I've thought about this a lot lately, and I see my practice, like, to even say the word medical practice, I'm like, no, that is not what we're doing. Like, this is truly like a medical sisterhood.
Yeah.
Because we learn, women heal in community, and this movement really needs to travel among women, you know, women, their friends, their colleagues, their daughters. Like, there is a generation of women who unfortunately haven't had this information. And so I really do feel like that component of like movement that is all of our responsibilities outside of the chaos of the medical system is so important.
If you could say one thing to that woman, what would you say to her?
I would say that you deserve to age with joy, strength, energy, and confidence. And that has to be your North Star. And like every decision is like, is this aligned to that North Star or not?
I love that. Where can they find you at?
So on the good old Instagram, it's Dr. Paige Do, so dr.paige.do, and GOZA Wellness, so GOZA Wellness. That's our website as well. So you can find me there.
Yeah, we'll put all that below too.
Great.
And for those that are listening to, this is an information-packed episode. I'm excited for this, and I want you to gather one thing. I challenge you all this all the time, but gather one thing that either was a light bulb moment, was I never thought about it like that, or something that Dr. Paige shared. And I want you to message her it on Instagram, because especially when we're having these conversations, you have them a lot one-on-one or with many women. But when you're podcasting, you don't get the, oh, that really hit home, or, oh, that was great. You just get my feedback from it. So it is incredibly helpful to know and understand what hits home with you. So please message her there. This will be out in a couple weeks. I'm really excited for just the information to get out to more women, no matter what age you are, no matter what season of life that you're in. We need to understand this about this. So there is going to be a part 2, because we got a lot to dig into, my friend.
Yeah, we do.
All right, crew. Have an amazing rest of your week. We love ya, and keep challenging yourself outside your comfort zone.